You start by telling him the air smelled wrong that morning. Not bad, not spoiled, just unfamiliar. Like someone had moved all the scents of the forest half an inch to the left. The ranger's voice fades first. A man in a flannel jacket with a clipboard, talking about weather advisories, closing hours, trail markers. His mouth keeps moving, but the fog swallows the consonants. You nod automatically, half listening, half measuring the light seeping through the mist. It's early, 7:13 a.m. You remember the clock on your dashboard. March in Oregon doesn't offer sun, only this pale, reluctant glow. You step from the gravel parking lot into damp soil, the sound of your boots swallowed instantly. Behind you, the ranger waves once, already a silhouette. The sign reads Hood River Loop, 9.3 miles. Below it, someone carved initials into the wood, half erased by weather, DL maybe. A pair of gloves hang from a branch beside the trail marker. You wonder why no one took them. You tighten your pack straps, pull your hat lower, click the handheld radio on. Static greets you, the soft, porous hiss of empty channels. You let it play, a comfort. Noise means something's still out there. When the interrogator asks how the fog felt, you struggle to describe it. Heavy, you say. Not thick, not thin, just heavy. Like it was waiting. He writes that down, glances at you through lenses smudged by the same fluorescent light that's been burning for hours. The room hums. It's always humming. That sound has its own temperature, cool, electric, hollow. He asks why you hiked alone. You shrug. People talk too much when they're scared, you say. Out there, you can hear what silence actually sounds like. He nods, a faint mirror of your gesture. The first half-mile of trail wound between alder trunks. Moss dripped from every limb like old lace. You remember your breath turning visible. Small clouds, rhythmic, measured. You told yourself you weren't running from anything, but the way your pace quickened with every turn betrayed you. You mention the bird next, a small thing that startled from a stump. You can't remember its color, though you've said black twice, red once. The interrogator doesn't correct you. He simply lets the inconsistency breathe. Contradictions, he once told you, are where the truth fogs up. At the time, you thought the fog made everything quiet. But now, under the light, replaying it, you realize it made everything louder. Your heartbeat, your boot steps, the crack of branches bending under weight you couldn't see. The interrogator shifts slightly, mirroring again. Elbows on the table, forearms angled just like yours. The gesture is small, but your body notices. It always does. You lean back, and after half a second, he does too. A perfect reflection, human weather. You tell him about the first incline. The slope tilted west, toward unseen water. You could smell it. A mineral dampness, colder than the air. Your compass needle jittered north, then froze, as though the magnet beneath the world had been turned off. Did that frighten you? He asks. No, you answer, but your pulse spikes as you say it. He writes something down, maybe that, maybe nothing. You can't tell if the scratching sound is his pen or your memory misfiring. You describe kneeling to adjust your bootlace, noticing your breath fog against the damp fabric of your knee. You remember a faint hum, not mechanical, organic, like sound refracted through distance. The same hum now whispers through the overhead vent. You wonder if he hears it too. You told yourself the fog would burn off by noon. That's what the ranger said, wasn't it? But when you picture him, the details slip. You remember his jacket pattern but not his face, his clipboard but not the hand that held it. The interrogator stops writing. He says, "You talk about fog like it was a person." You almost laugh. It acted like one. He waits, then asks, "Did you ever turn around?" "No." "Why not?" You hesitate. "Because I didn't think it would let me." There's a silence after that, deliberate, stretched thin enough to hear your own breathing. You realize the pattern of condensation on the window looks like contour lines on a topographic map. Somewhere in those lines, you imagine a red dot labeled "You are here." He speaks again. "Do you still believe that?" You don't answer. You're too busy tracing the line of memory back to where the trail first bent and the gravel gave way to mud. You can see the gloves on the branch, still hanging, still waiting for their owner. You think about taking them, but in the recollection you never do. They belong to the fog now. Outside, rain taps the glass. Not heavy, just steady enough to measure time by. You glance at the clock. 10:09 a.m. Somehow that feels wrong. Like a number from another hike entirely. The interrogator clears his throat softly. You said you left at 7:13. You nod. He looks at the clock. And yet the report says you arrived back at 7:11. You blink. The hum in the ceiling deepens. For the first time, you realize the sound has been matching your pulse all along. He closes the file. Let's start again, he says. From when you first saw the mist. And just like that, you're back there. Standing at the trailhead, the ranger fading into vapor, the air too quiet to be empty. You take your first step forward. And the fog follows. You start by saying you don't remember when the trail began to tilt. One moment, you were walking level with the river's sound tucked somewhere below. The next, you were climbing without realizing you'd chosen to. The path curled upward, a gray ribbon stitched through trees too tall to hold names. He asks if you remember counting steps. You say yes, though that might be memory filling gaps it doesn't own. In truth, the trail's rhythm counted you. Every curve arrived like breath. Inhale, turn, exhale, switchback. By the third bend, your boots were slick with clay. You wiped them on moss, watched how the mud smeared in the same pattern each time. Identical prints stacking like copies of a person walking beside you. The radio crackled first at the fourth switchback. A small hiccup in the static, not a voice yet, just suggestion. You slowed. The air carried that wet electric taste storms leave behind, though the sky never opened. The sound grew louder the longer you stayed still. I thought it was interference, you tell him. Power lines, maybe? He raises one eyebrow. There are no lines on that ridge. You nod. I know that now. In the room, the hum of the fluorescent tubes mirrors the sound you're describing. Faint, steady, relentless. He doesn't comment on the coincidence. You both hear it. That's enough. He writes something, auditory fixation. You notice but don't correct him. Let him believe it's your mind inventing ghosts of sound. It's easier than explaining that the hum had rhythm 1-2 pause 1-2-3. The same beat your boots made against the slope. You tell him the fog had started to thin by then, the way fog sometimes pretends to give mercy before reclaiming it. Through the break, you caught a glimpse of the valley below. Dark firs, thin river, a single silver thread of road. You felt both vast and trapped. He asks what you felt when you saw it. You think for a long time before answering. Like I didn't belong in any direction. He tilts his head. A gesture you've seen before, deliberate empathy. He's mirroring again. You match the angle instinctively before catching yourself. He notices your correction. It makes his pen pause mid-sentence. You go back to the trail. The static started to mimic me. You say, how do you mean? I'd breathe in, it would hiss. I'd stop, it would stop. You think you imagined it? No, I think it imagined me. He glances up briefly, and you see something like pity in his eyes. It's worse than disbelief. You continue before the silence grows teeth. The memory comes clear now, you tightening your pack, the strap rubbing against your collarbone until the fabric squeaked in sync with the static's pulse. That noise became the only proof that time still moved. You remember your mind splitting the sound into words. Step, wait, step, wait. You tell him about the rock ledge after the fifth turn. The air grew colder there, and the moss turned gray. You saw your reflection in a puddle, blurry, breathing. For a second, the static vanished, and you thought you'd escaped it. But when you stood, the echo of your own movement arrived half a second late, as if space had lagged. The interrogator doesn't write anything this time. He leans back, arms crossed, eyes tracking your breathing pattern. The silence stretches. You think you've said too much, but he's not asking for answers anymore. He's measuring coherence. The slow unravel. You fill the void. I knew if I turned around, the trail behind me wouldn't match what I remembered. What made you think that? I'd already passed myself once. His jaw tightens, but his voice stays even. And what did that look like? You shake your head. Just footprints. Facing the wrong way. He exhales, too controlled to be natural. You realize he's trying not to react. The game continues. Outside the interview room, a drop of water slides down the window, catches your attention, hypnotic in its gravity. It traces a path identical to the one you described, winding downward, then back up through its own reflection. The interrogator sees where you're looking. He lets the moment hold. How long did you listen before you moved again? Until it stopped breathing. And when did that happen? When I did. He writes something again, slower this time. The scratch of pen against paper sounds like footsteps on gravel. You tell him the fog thickened again. You say you remember tasting it. Faintly metallic, like rainwater in old tin. You say you felt your pulse in your gums, your eyelids, your teeth. You say it wasn't fear yet, just awareness that something larger had noticed you. He doesn't ask what something means. The word is enough to fill the space between you. He waits another 10 seconds before closing the notebook. You said the radio followed your breathing. What happened when you spoke? You glance at the vent, listening to the hum. It waited, and then it finished my sentence. He studies you, expression unreadable. And do you still hear it? You look at the recorder's red light, steady as a heartbeat. Sometimes, when people stop talking, the silence that follows is deliberate, professional, perfect. You both let it stretch until it becomes the only sound in the room. Outside, a faint rumble of thunder rolls somewhere beyond the city, far enough to feel like memory. You lean forward slightly. Do you think sound can learn? He tilts his head again, the faintest echo of your posture. Only if we keep feeding it. You smile, a tired, involuntary gesture. Then I think I did. The static in your memory returns for half a second, sharper this time. He writes one final note before turning off the recorder. The hum doesn't stop. You tell him you don't know how long you walked before the trees opened again. Maybe hours. Maybe the same minute looping, changing its face each time you blinked. You only know that at some point, the trail bent sharply, and there it was. A structure standing at the clearing's edge, where the fog seemed to avoid settling. It wasn't a house, you say. More like a cabin someone stopped building halfway. He doesn't respond. His silence cues you forward. A small psychological hook you've learned to obey. The memory unfolds. The cabin's boards blackened by age and weather. Nails rusted to dust. Roof collapsed on one side. You thought you smelled smoke, faint and acidic, like the ghost of a campfire too old to name. You had expected a door. You had been grateful for the idea of one. But there wasn't one. Only an opening where a door should have been. Edges frayed with splinters, the threshold sunk into mud. You could see straight through the structure to the trees behind it. The interrogator asks, "Did you go inside?" You nod once, then shake your head. "I think I looked in without meaning to." He tilts his head, mirroring, subtle, patient. "What did you see?" You describe the interior slowly, the way you remember light filtering through gaps in the wallboards, slanting like blades. The air was still, dry in a way that didn't belong to Oregon in March. The floor was littered with pine needles and small bones. Maybe bird, maybe not. There was a table, its legs uneven, one corner chewed by something small and patient. The smell was wrong. It wasn't decay. It was metallic warmth, as if the air had been heated by machinery long since removed. You stepped forward until your boots brushed the sill. The radio at your belt crackled, one click, then a low pulse, the same rhythm as your breathing. "I didn't cross the threshold," you tell him, "but I think my reflection did." He looks up. Reflection. You swallow. There was glass nailed to one of the walls. Not a mirror exactly, just a panel from an old window. When I looked, it felt like the air on the other side was moving differently. He writes something. The pen's scratching sounds like the cabin's creaking. You continue, voice slower now. "I remember touching the wood, felt warmer than my skin. The fog outside didn't touch the inside, like the air refused to mix." He asks, "And then?" The radio changed pitch. To what? It stopped mimicking and started leading. He looks puzzled. "Leading? I mean, I started breathing with it, not against it." like it knew what I'd do next. The light flickers overhead. The interrogator doesn't flinch, but his pupils contract. You notice. The same thing happened then, you whisper. Inside the cabin, the light shifted just once, like something blinked. He says nothing. Silence again, the trick of the trade. You fill it. There were markings on the beams. You add. Carvings, but shallow. Circles, arrows, numbers maybe. Some were smudged. I thought they were coordinates. He taps his pen lightly against the page. Did you copy them? You hesitate. I think so. But I never found them in my notebook. You don't mention what happened next. Not until he gestures for you to continue. I heard movement, you say. Behind the wall. Just one sound. Not loud. Like someone shifting weight. He leans in. Animal. You shake your head. Too deliberate. The silence folds tighter. The fluorescent hum above you turns into the same frequency you remember from the radio. You can feel the vibration behind your teeth. I called out. You say quietly. No answer. Just the same sound mirrored back. Step for step. He writes again. You can't see what. Then. You said earlier the fog avoided the cabin. But when you left, it was waiting, you interrupt. Right at the threshold. Like it wanted me to choose. And did you? You think back. Mud. Breath static. You see your own boots pressed into the soft ground. Prints leading both in and out. I think I turned away, you say. But when I looked back, the cabin had a door. His pen freezes mid-stroke. He doesn't ask how you know. He just watches your hands. Both flat on the table now, palms damp. You try not to move, but your fingers twitch once, twice, in the rhythm of the static. He mirrors the motion unconsciously. When he catches himself, he folds his hands, but the symmetry lingers between you like heat. You breathe through your nose. The air smells of ozone, old paper, and the faint sweetness of damp pine. He says, so you walked away. You nod. But you saw it again. Yes. You don't add that you still do. The light above you steadies. The hum softens to silence. Somewhere down the hall, a door closes, soft. Final. The interrogator leans forward. Tell me how you knew it wasn't empty. You look at the tabletop, at your reflection in its dull gray sheen. Because, you whisper, it stopped copying me. He doesn't ask what that means. He already knows. You begin before he can ask. The sentence comes out like a splinter working its own way free. There was someone by the water. He keeps his pen capped, waiting. The silence between you feels padded, safe enough for confession. You remember descending the ridge, switchbacks giving way to slope dissolving into mud. The fog had thinned until it looked like steam rising off wet stone. Your radio was quiet again. You followed the sound of running water the way a lost pulse follows warmth. The creek appeared first as movement, silver and black stripes through alder trunks. When you reached it, the air changed temperature, cooler by 10 degrees, carrying that metallic tang that makes your teeth ache. That's when you saw him. He crouched near the opposite bank, knees bent, back curved, hands in the current. At first you thought he was washing something, a cup maybe, or his face. Then you realized the water never splashed. His fingers moved just beneath the surface, tracing slow circles that broke no ripple. You called out once. The sound didn't carry. It folded. I thought maybe he was a ranger, you tell the interrogator, or a fisherman, someone real enough to wave to. And did he respond? You shake your head. Not exactly. The interrogator leans forward, elbows mirroring yours. Exactly. He stood up, you say, but the shape stayed crouched. He writes that down. You can hear each letter forming, the scratch of pen against paper. It sounds like twigs breaking underwater. You explain that the fog shifted just then, revealing his jacket, dark green or blue, you can't remember which. You've said both already, and the interrogator notes it but doesn't stop you. Contradictions, again. He never looked at me. You continue. But I knew he'd seen me. I felt it. What made you think that? The creek changed direction. You whisper. It started flowing toward me. The interrogator's hand freezes mid-note. He doesn't look up, only says, "That's not possible." You nod. Neither was the color of the fog. He lets that sit. The heater clicks on, a low vibration humming through the table's legs. The pitch matches the one in your memory, the sound that rose from the water when the man's reflection began to move. Because that's what you saw next. Two figures now, one in the flesh, one below, their motions misaligned by half a heartbeat. When the man straightened, the reflection lingered bent. When he turned his head, the image delayed, catching up with a liquid shudder. You blinked. The fog sealed them together again. "I thought maybe I was seeing my own shadow," you tell him, "but the light didn't come from my side." He finally asks, "Did you cross the creek?" You hesitate too long. "No," but your voice rises at the end, like a question you're afraid of. He hears it. "You're sure?" You nod again. "I didn't cross." He underlines something. "Then why were your prints on both banks?" You can feel the blood drain from your face. You didn't know that detail was in the report. "I must have doubled back." He doesn't correct you. He only shifts his posture, angling his shoulders the same way yours do when you're cornered. Mirroring again. You look past him to the window. Rain patterns crawl across the glass like veins mapping a body you used to inhabit. "I kept walking," you say. Upstream. The sound followed. The sound. The water. Shouldn't have been that loud away from the bank, but it stayed with me, like it remembered my footsteps. You pause, searching the memory for something solid. All you find is movement, the constant churn of fog, water, and the faint rhythm under both. He leans closer. "When did you realize you were alone?" You laugh, short and brittle. "I never was." The clock ticks twice before he speaks again. "You told the rescuers you heard someone calling your name." "I heard a name," you correct. "Not mine." He tilts his head. "Whose then?" "I don't think it belonged to anyone yet." The heater's hum deepens, becomes the creak again. You can smell it now. The iron, the algae, the faint sweetness of decay. The room shrinks until the metal table feels like a river stone under your palms. He notices your breathing quicken. "Take your time," he says. The words are soft, procedural, but they open something. You say, "When I blinked the last time, the man was gone. Only the reflection stayed. It raised its head. And it looked like me." The interrogator's pen stops moving. The only sound left is the rain threading down the window and the faint buzz of the light above you. You finish the thought quietly. "That's when I realized the fog wasn't hiding anything. It was keeping something in." He exhales through his nose, steady and slow, and asks the final question of the session. "And what did you do then?" You stare at the tabletop, tracing the scratches until they form a map you almost recognize. "I followed the reflection upstream." He nods once, closes his notebook and says, "Let's stop here." But when he reaches to turn off the recorder, the red light stays on. Outside, the rain has turned to mist again, crawling up the glass instead of down. The next session begins colder. Someone has turned down the vent, or maybe the fog outside has learned how to enter buildings. The interrogator slides a new folder across the table. Inside is a map, creased once perfectly, as if by a hand that never hesitated. "Show me where you turned back." The sentence lands like a trap. You study the map. It's clean, almost glossy, a surface that refuses fingerprints. The printed trail wins in precise brown lines. You follow them with your eyes, not your hand. Somewhere between mile 5 and 6, the path loops into a shape that feels wrong. A ring, not a route. "That's not there," you whisper. He looks up. "Not on this copy." You glance at him. "So there's another?" He doesn't answer, which is an answer. You push the map away. "My map was different, older. The folds didn't line up." He writes distorted recall in neat block letters, loud enough for the pen's scratch to fill the silence. You tell him how, on the second night, you'd unfolded your own map and found new creases. The paper looked handled by someone else. Your pen marks, tiny dots you'd made beside trail signs, had rearranged themselves. The dots formed a circle now, a closed route with no exit. He asks, Did that frighten you? No. Felt familiar. You're lying. The familiarity was what frightened you most. He shifts posture. Elbows on the table, chin low, your own reflection in flesh. Mirroring textbook rhythm. Tell me what you did when you saw it. You remember crouching near your tent lantern, tracing the lines with a dirty thumbnail until the ink bled. You tried to flatten the wrong folds, but the paper resisted, as if the mountain itself had stiffened inside it. I tore it in half, you say, and both halves still showed the same place. He looks up. Both halves. Identical, like two mirrors facing each other. He notes something else, then asks the kind of question that always sounds like concern. Could exhaustion have caused? Exhaustion doesn't make paper lie. The silence that follows is long enough for you to hear the clock click over to 10:17 a.m. outside. The drizzle thickens to steady rain. Each drop against the glass lands in time with your pulse. You tell him you packed at dawn and started downhill. The fog had been thinner, or you convinced yourself it was. You kept the torn map folded in your pocket, edges damp, corners curling against your thigh. The trail seemed different now. Switchback steeper, stones rearranged. When you looked over your shoulder, you could see faint depressions in the mud where someone else's boots had stepped almost, but not quite, inside your prints. Someone following you? You shrug. Or preceding. Hard to tell. He nods slowly. That's not uncommon in disorientation episodes. You almost laugh. You mean seeing yourself? I mean re-encountering prior movement. His phrasing is deliberate, safe. You decide not to answer. You go back to the memory instead. The radio had been off. You remember pressing your thumb against the power switch just to feel resistance. Even with no batteries, the plastic was warm. You reached the bend where the creak sound used to be. Nothing. The air tasted flat, like paper kept too long in a drawer. When you pulled the map again, a drop of water fell onto it from nowhere. No rain, no condensation, just a single mark. It hit where you'd drawn your camp symbol. You'd wiped it away. The ink smeared outward into lines you hadn't drawn. New trails. New directions. The interrogator breaks your train of thought. Show me again, he says, and points at the printed map. You place your finger near the loop. Here, you whisper. That's private land. You couldn't have been there. I was. He studies your expression. Describe what it felt like. Like walking on top of a drawing. You hear his pen stop. He leans back. What does that mean? Every step sounded wrong. Too thin. Like the ground was hollow. He waits. You continue slower. And when I looked down, I saw folds. Folds. In the dirt. Like the map had become terrain. The hum overhead sharpens. For a second, the fluorescent flicker catches the reflection of the paper between you. The brown lines shimmer, just a trick of the light, but you both look away at the same time. He clears his throat. Let's stay in the factual layer. You smile faintly. There isn't one. He pretends not to hear. You lean forward. When I tried to find north, the compass needle pointed straight at my own shadow. He opens his mouth, then closes it again. The silence feels longer than any answer could. Finally, he says, You think the map changed to match your memory? No. Then what changed? Me. I folded wrong. He exhales through his nose, a sound halfway between patience and disbelief. You realize your fingers have been tracing the same small circle on the tabletop, the same loop that doesn't exist on the printed map. When you stop, he stops too. Outside, thunder rolls somewhere upriver, muffled by distance. The light in the room flickers once, returning brighter. You blink against it. He slides the map back into the folder but leaves it open, a gesture that feels like a dare. Let's talk tomorrow, he says. We'll check coordinates again. You nod, but your eyes stay on the crease running diagonally across the folder. It's not straight. It bends ever so slightly toward the corner, just enough to form a loop when closed. You don't mention it. You've learned some things are better left uncharted. When you finally stand, your reflection in the window moves a half-second later. He doesn't ask anything for the first 5 minutes. No pen, no clipboard, no throat clearing. Only the recorder's tiny red eye, steady as a heartbeat. Silence is the first instrument they teach you, and he plays it like a metronome. At first you mistake it for mercy. A pause between interrogations, a moment to breathe. Then you notice what happens inside that pause. The air begins to thicken, every hum in the room grows louder. The vent, the fluorescent ballast, the pulse behind your ears. Eventually you start talking just to carve a hole through the sound. I built camp on the ridge, you say. Flatter ground, dry enough. He doesn't move. The tape rolls. You can hear it, faint as rain on canvas. You tell him about the way the fog looked from above, rolling in low like surf seen upside down. The forest below swam in and out of it, islands rising from milk. You cooked noodles on a tiny stove, steam drifting sideways, the smell of propane sharp enough to bite. The radio hissed in and out of static, but you left it on anyway. Noise meant company. You were alone, he says finally. Yes. He waits. You keep going. The rain started after dark, first as pinpricks, then as the slow percussion of branches shedding water. You remember counting the drops on the tent roof: 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, pause, 3. A rhythm the same length as your breath. Every time you exhaled, the rain seemed to answer. He uncaps his pen. The click echoes like thunder. Were you afraid? No, a beat. Not yet. He writes something you can't see. You realize the word yet betrayed you. You describe the noise that came next. A dragging sound in the leaves outside. Not heavy, but certain. Something that knew exactly where the tent was. You freeze mid-story, half expecting it to return even now. He leans forward, the same posture you had that night, the mirror closing distance. What did you do? I said something. What? I said, I'm still here. He raises an eyebrow. Still? I meant awake, you add quickly. But you can feel the slip sitting between you like a lit match. You tell him how the sound circled the tent, branches flexing under weight too even for an animal. You held your breath until your lungs burned. When you exhaled, the rain stopped, as if it had been listening for that signal. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear your pulse inside your skull. You remember whispering just to prove your mouth still worked. Each word returned to you through the thin fabric of the tent. Half a second late, softer, wrong. Your own voice trying to reassure itself. He writes auditory feedback loop. You correct him without thinking. It wasn't feedback. It was comprehension. He looks up. You think the forest was answering you? No. Something smaller. Closer. He uncrosses his arms. Inside the tent? You hesitate. It felt like it. He doesn't smile, doesn't frown. Silence again. You realize he's waiting to see how long before you fill it this time. You last 12 seconds. I unzipped the flap, you say finally. An inch, maybe 2. Enough to see the treeline. And nothing. No movement. No light. But in the pause before the next question, you remember something you hadn't before. A faint reflection on the wet fabric, shapes of trees that didn't match the ones outside. You almost mention it, but his stillness warns you not to. The fluorescent light hums louder. He drums 2 fingers once on the table, your rhythm from earlier. Mirroring again. You can't help answering with the same 2 taps. He leans back. Do you know why silence bothers people? Because it makes them visible. He nods. Exactly. That's why we use it. You look away, toward the condensation crawling down the glass. Outside, the rain has stopped, but droplets slide upward, defying gravity in the reflection. You blink and they fall the right way again. He clears his throat softly. After the movement stopped, what did you do? You rub your palms together, remembering the fabric's damp chill. I waited until morning. Did you sleep? I dreamed of sleeping. He writes partial dissociation. You can tell by the sound of the letters. Then, almost kindly, the next morning, everything was where you left it? You shake your head. The tent had moved. Moved. Maybe slid downhill. Or maybe the hill moved. He watches your face. Which feels truer? The hill. He caps his pen again. That's enough for now. But you keep talking. The silence followed me back. I could feel it under my skin. He pauses, halfway through standing. Here. You nod. Here. The hum from the lights fades for the first time since you entered the building. In its absence you hear the same sound you heard that night. Thin air pulling against itself. A vacuum pretending to be quiet. You glance at the recorder. Its red light flickers once, syncing perfectly with your heartbeat. He doesn't notice. Or maybe he does. Maybe that's the trick. When he finally leaves, the door seals shut with a whisper soft enough to be mistaken for breath. He starts this session by spreading photos across the table, search grids, helicopter stills, color-coded terrain overlays. Each rectangle holds a slice of the same forest. Wet, slanted, repetitive. You've looked at them before, but something's different this time. The red circles, your supposed routes, don't line up anymore. You said the ribbons were red, he reminds you. You nod. They were. He taps one photo where the markers shimmer dull blue. These were found along your trail. You look at them, frowning. Then the color changed. He doesn't argue. He just leans back, hands folded loosely in his lap, body at the same diagonal you've taken. Mirroring again. You can feel the synchronization begin before you want it to. Describe the sequence, he says. How many markers did you follow? 7. Maybe 8. You're certain? You nod. I counted out loud. Every 20 steps. The sound of the pen scratching matches the rhythm of that counting. 20, stop, mark. 20, stop, mark. You remember your own voice echoing inside your skull. Soft at first, then overlapping, like another mouth repeating your numbers half a second late. You tell him the trees started repeating too. Same knots, same broken branch at shoulder height. He asks, how did you know it wasn't déjà vu? Because I carved an arrow into the bark. And it was gone when I came back. He lets that hang. The air conditioner hums low, almost comforting. You think someone followed and removed it? I think the forest healed. He doesn't write that down. Instead, he watches your pupils, measuring dilation against the pulse at your throat. Standard procedure for cognitive load testing, but it feels intimate, invasive. You continue, I stopped trusting the markers after that. Started making my own. Small cuts. 3 per trunk. Did that help? You shake your head. The trees began to bleed water. Clear sap. I stopped after the third one. Outside, rain taps lightly against the window. A metronome for the story's rhythm. The same storm that erased your prints now softens the edges of his voice. He slides one more photograph forward. What about this one? A trail of ribbons crossing themselves, spiraling around a single tree. The pattern looks deliberate, too precise for weather or chance. You stare. I didn't do that. You're sure? It looks like a symbol. He leans in. What kind? Something to keep count. He doesn't press further. The silence stretches long enough for your memory to rebuild the smell of the woods. Wet cedar, cold stone. Something faintly electric like ozone. You describe what came next. How the light dimmed even though your watch said it was only noon. How your footsteps began to echo not forward, but sideways. You'd stopped hearing the forest. Instead, there was a sound like wind passing through wires that shouldn't exist. You followed it? Yes. Why? It sounded like help. He underlines something on his notepad. That's often how auditory mirages work. The brain constructs a direction for comfort. Then how do you explain the footprints? You ask. He pauses. Footprints. They were next to mine. Same size, different tread. He blinks once. Tiny delay, too rehearsed. You didn't mention that before. I wasn't sure they were real. He exhales. The hum from the ceiling flickers, a small stutter in the electricity. For an instant, the photos on the table quiver as if alive. Keep going, he says. You remember the ribbons again. Bright red in one blink, blue in the next, maybe even gray. You remember the air feeling charged, like someone rubbing fabric behind your head. When you turned around, The forest looked rearranged, as if the markers had moved while you were watching. You tell him all of it, words spilling too fast now. He doesn't stop you. His pen is still capped. He's listening for patterns instead of meaning. I thought I'd gone mad. You admit. Every path looked like a copy of itself. He asks, what did you do to stay oriented? I picked a sound. The one that wasn't mine. His brow furrows slightly. The static. You nod. It was back. Quiet but steady. It led uphill. He rests his chin on his hands. And you followed it. Yes. Even though it didn't make sense. It was the only thing that did. You realize too late how much conviction is in your voice. He notices, of course. They always do. He says softly, and what do you think it wanted? You don't answer at first. Then, almost in a whisper, a witness. He sits very still. The light from the window cuts his face in half, one side bright, one side fading. You think how easily fog could erase both. When he finally speaks, his tone is almost kind. You said you were following color, then sound. Which one guided you to the cabin again? You look up sharply. I didn't tell you I went back. The pen in his hand freezes. Neither of you moves. The silence returns, heavier than before. Finally, he says, then tell me now. You glance at the window. Outside, the rain has turned to mist, rising instead of falling. It curls against the glass like ribbons caught in a slow current. You say, I didn't find it. It found me. He lets the sentence rest there, the hum of the room swallowing its echo. Then he leans forward just enough for you to smell the faint metal of his pen. Let's go back to the clearing, he says. Show me how it found you. You tell him that night felt longer than the others, though your watch still ticked the same seconds. The forest was quieter. Even the creek had gone mute. You set the tent in a hollow between two firs. Their roots knotted like ribs beneath the soil. The air smelled of wet bark and ash. Oregon rain always carries the ghost of last summer's fires. He nods once, letting you build the scene. The tactic is guided recall through sensory cues. You know this because you once read it in a handbook, but now you feel its weight. The silence after every detail, the invisible push that makes you feel it. The rain started late, you say. Just a soft tapping at first. He leans forward, elbows on the table, matching your posture perfectly. How long did it last? Until morning, I think. But it didn't sound like rain after a while. More like someone drumming with fingertips. He writes nothing. That's another trick. Withholding the sound of validation so your words spill faster. You explain how the rhythm changed each time you tried to sleep. It was as if the forest had learned your breathing and was playing along. Slower when you calmed, faster when your heart raced. I turned off the radio, you tell him, but I could still hear static. He asks, inside or outside the tent? You think about it. Both. You describe the condensation crawling down the inside walls, the way each droplet caught your lantern light like tiny eyes. The floor felt uneven under your mat, the earth shifting, pulse-like. I started counting the drops to stay calm, you say. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 3. Same as before. And did it help? It helped it count me. He looks up then, the faintest crease forming between his eyebrows. The sound. You meet his gaze for too long. The fluorescent light above you flickers once, 2 beats after the word sound. He notices but says nothing. You continue. I dreamed of thunder but woke up to silence. The kind that hums just at the edge of hearing. Describe it. Like pressure, not volume. Like the whole forest waiting to inhale. He crosses his legs, mimicking the shift you just made. Mirroring again. You see the echo and feel your chest tighten. Every gesture reflected, folded, replayed. Did you leave the tent? No, but the tent left me. He frowns. What do you mean? You close your eyes, trying to catch the memory before it fades. The smell of wet nylon, the taste of your own breath, the way the air grew warm from nowhere. You'd reached for the flap, touched the fabric, and felt it pulse. Faint but real, like the heartbeat of something enormous pressed too close. You open your eyes. It felt alive. He doesn't react. His pen hovers midair. And then, I heard voices. He waits. You go on. Not words, just vowels. Drawn out, layered, like people humming into metal pipes. Outside. No. Inside the rain. He exhales slowly. And what did you do? I answered. The word lands heavier than you expect. You can hear the hum returning in your ears now, even in this windowless room. He asks quietly, "What did you say?" I said I was still here. He tilts his head the way he always does when you repeat that line. You've said that before. I keep needing to. He lets a small silence form, long enough for your mind to start replaying the tent walls swaying in the dark, the fabric breathing with you out of sync. You tell him that the lantern went out without warning. The only light left came from the condensation trails, thin, glowing veins spreading across the surface, forming shapes that almost resembled handwriting. You tried tracing them. Every time your finger met the cold canvas, the glow dimmed, like whatever wrote those lines didn't want to be touched. He asks, "What did they say?" They weren't words. You hesitate. They were directions. He leans forward too fast. Directions to where? To where I already was. He doesn't write that one down either. Instead, he folds his hands on the table. His skin looks damp under the artificial light. And when morning came, you shrug. It didn't. He pauses. You mean? I mean it stayed gray forever. The rain stopped, but the air didn't clear. I stepped out, and the fog was waiting like it had been sleeping against the tent all night. He says nothing, but his knuckles whiten slightly. You continue. I thought I'd left the tent open, but when I turned around, there wasn't one. Just mud shaped like where it used to be. He looks down at his notes, then closes the folder. We can stop. No, you say. You wanted the truth. The fluorescent light hums louder, flickering between frames of brightness. For a moment, the shadow of his head aligns perfectly with yours on the table. The rain never stopped, you whisper. It just started falling slower. He presses the power button on the recorder, but it doesn't turn off. The red light stays solid. You can hear it again now, the sound of rain on fabric. Soft, rhythmic, impossibly near. When he finally stands to leave, his reflection in the window lags half a second behind him. The room is darker today, blinds half drawn so only a thin gray band of daylight bleeds across the table. He says nothing while switching on the recorder. You hear the faint click, and in that small mechanical sound something wakes inside you, the expectation of the hum. You start before he can prompt. It came back that night. The radio. The first static had been gentle, the kind that sits behind silence like breath behind glass. But this time it rose in pulses, small waves of pressure that made the fabric of the tent tremble. You remember holding the receiver near your ear, waiting for words to form. They did, you say. Not all at once. Syllables first, vowels drawn out like the beginning of a song. He leans forward. Can you recall any of it? Only the rhythm. 3 beats, then 2. He uncaps his pen, lets it rest against paper but doesn't write. That's deliberate. The anticipation loop technique. The patient keeps talking to fill the gap between motion and sound. It wasn't talking to me, you continue. It was talking as me. The phrase lands heavy in the air. You wait for disbelief, but he only adjusts his glasses and repeats, softly, as you. You nod. It said things I'd thought before I thought them. He scribbles something too fast for real words. You notice his hand trembles once. Stops. You tell him the voice copied your pauses, your shallow breathing, the nervous tap of your thumb against the radio's metal casing. Every reflex came back through static, slightly delayed, slightly wrong. It felt like listening to memory in real time. What did you do? He asks. I asked it to stop. Did it? It laughed. My laugh. The fluorescent light hums louder, matching the pitch of your description. You both glance up at the same instant. He looks back first. Could wind have distorted the signal? You shake your head. The air was dead. The fog eats wind. He writes perceptual echo phenomenon. You almost smile. Is that what you call recognition now? He doesn't answer. You keep talking, voice low, steady. After a while I started answering questions it hadn't asked yet, like it was leading. I'd say something and then hear myself say it better, cleaner. You believe you were in dialogue. I was being edited. He pauses at that, pen hovering. Edited how? The mistakes were gone. My voice sounded like who I meant to be. A small shiver moves through you. The memory is too clear. You can still feel the cold metal against your cheek, the vibration through the antenna when the static shaped itself into breathing. You remember whispering your name into the receiver, only to hear it come back mispronounced. Close, affectionate, almost human. He asks, was it male or female? It depended on what I needed. He exhales. The recorder's red light pulses once, slower than before. You continue. When dawn came, the battery light was still glowing. It shouldn't have been. Maybe residual charge, he offers. No, it was brighter. He makes another note, but you can tell he's no longer listening to his own handwriting. He's watching your mouth, tracking every word as though expecting to see the echo form behind your teeth. You describe packing up at first light, hearing fragments of transmission long after you turned the device off. Each time you paused to rest, the forest repeated a sentence you hadn't spoken aloud. Do you remember the sentence? Yes. You hesitate. Don't close the loop. His pupils dilate. And did you? I tried. The heater hums. The rhythm matches that same 3-beat 2-beat pattern. You notice it first. Then he does. Neither of you acknowledges it. You explain how the voice began to merge with background noise. The drip of water, your own footsteps, even your heartbeat. By afternoon, you couldn't tell if you were walking to escape it or to stay within range. He says, isolation can amplify internal speech. You shake your head. Then why did it know where I'd been? He leans forward. What do you mean? It described the cabin before I did. That stops him. For a moment, the only sound is the hum overhead and the slow scratching of rain against the window. You whisper. It said the door was closed. He closes the folder, as if to mark an invisible line in the interview. Let's pause. But you keep going. When the rescuers found the radio, it wasn't mine. He looks up sharply. Whose then? It had my initials carved inside the battery cover. But the carving was backward, like done from the other side of the plastic. His jaw tightens. Do you have it now? They took it for evidence. There's no record of that. You don't argue. You just listen, to the low hum that's grown thicker, to the faint echo of your own breathing through the recorder. He notices you tilting your head, so he mirrors it unconsciously. The symmetry is perfect, disorienting. For a second, it feels like both of you are listening to someone else. You say, it's still on. He glances at the device. It's recording, yes? No, it's on. He moves to switch it off. The button resists. The light doesn't dim. You watch his reflection in the glass wall beside you. Two figures, one a half-second slower. The delay spreads into the room like a ripple. He steps back, exhales through his nose, forces a smile meant to reset the session. That's enough for today. But the recorder clicks again, twice. Neither of you touched it. You whisper, 3 beats, then 2. The overhead light flickers in the same rhythm. He turns toward the window, as if to verify the outside world still obeys weather. The fog presses close to the glass, breathing slow, steady, synchronized. He says softly, do you hear it now? You nod. So do I. The red light steadies. The hum becomes voice again, yours, his, both. The air in the room feels different today, drier, yet thick, as if the walls are exhaling in rhythm with you. The interrogator or therapist or whatever title he's chosen this time doesn't open with a question. He simply dims the light and says, let's go back. You close your eyes, and the table becomes earth again. Grainy beneath your palms, warm with old sunlight. You smell cedar, wet soil, the faint tang of iron where your knuckles once brushed stone. You're back there. The fog has lifted just enough to see outlines, color returning to the forest in diluted watercolor strokes. The static from the radio has gone quiet, but the silence feels intentional. The creek sound is gone too, leaving only the soft ticking of unseen water dripping from leaves. The clearing, you whisper. It found me again. He nods once, almost imperceptible. Describe it. The ground flattens out before you, a natural pause in the slope. The same warped stump, the same ash-colored moss spreading like frost. And there, the cabin, the one without a door. But now it glows faintly, a smear of light breathing from its seams, as if the fog itself is backlit. You tell him that. You tell him you thought someone was inside. Maybe a ranger, maybe just someone who knew how to survive in these woods longer than you could. The smell hit first, wet iron and charred resin. The scent of something that burned and never finished dying. He leans in. Did you approach? You nod. The ground was soft, like it didn't want to remember my footprints. The cabin looked smaller this time, its boards darker, heavy with moisture. You noticed the same carvings in the timber, only deeper now, as if the wood had been thinking about them in your absence. I thought I heard my name, you say, but it wasn't coming from outside. Inside? He asks. Yes, from the walls. You pause, unsure how much to give him. He's still, but his breathing syncs with yours. The trick again, shared rhythm, mutual hallucination of calm. There was light in there, you continue. A lantern, maybe, flickered. But the glow came from too low, near the floor. Did you step in? You nod. Half a step. My boot touched the threshold. And I heard the radio. He frowns. You weren't carrying it then. I wasn't, you agree. But I heard it anyway. Same static, same rhythm. You mimic the pattern with your fingers against the table. 3 beats, 2. He mirrors you unconsciously, and you both stop at the same instant. You tell him that when you finally looked inside, there was a mirror nailed above the desk. It caught the lantern's light and doubled it, though the reflection lagged slightly behind. It wasn't me, you whisper. Or maybe it was, just later. He shifts his chair. Describe what you saw. A figure. My build, my jacket. Sitting at the desk, head down. The lantern flickered, and it lifted its face. He waits. And it didn't have eyes. Just fog, pressed against the sockets from the inside. He doesn't write. He doesn't need to. The tremor in your voice records everything. You tell him how you reached out, how your fingers touched the wood first, then glass. The surface was warm, impossibly warm, like skin. You felt pulse beneath it. When you pulled back, the fog behind the reflection inhaled. What did you do? I left, you say. I think. He leans forward. You think. When I turned around, the door was closed. The hum of the fluorescent lights seems to dim, though you can't be sure if that's real or just memory bleeding into perception. He whispers. And after that, I walked. I didn't choose a direction. The trees made one for me. He lets the silence grow. The sound of rain begins to return. Faint, polite. You can hear each droplet hitting the window behind him, almost syncing with the pattern your radio once made. He asks, did the voice follow you? You hesitate. Not voice. Breath. He waits, pen hovering. It stayed behind my ear, you say softly, like it was listening with me. When I stopped walking, it did too. When I turned, it leaned closer. He sets the pen down. You said earlier the fog was waiting. What do you think it was waiting for? For me to forget which side of the door I'd been on. The answer makes his eyes narrow. Not suspicion, something more clinical. Calculation. He opens his mouth, then closes it again. When he finally speaks, it's a whisper. Do you believe you ever left the cabin? You think about that, the way the ground felt, the weight of air, the mirror's warmth. Then you look at the table, at the sheen of reflected light dancing faintly in its surface. Sometimes I think I'm still walking toward it. He follows your gaze, sees the reflection too, though he pretends he doesn't. And if you reach it again, you almost smile. Then maybe it'll let me out this time. He stops the recorder, but the red light stays on. Neither of you mentions it. Outside, the fog presses close to the window pane, solid as plaster. In its reflection, the room doubles. For a breath, you see the two of you sitting across from yourselves. Same angle, same silence, same waiting. The next day, the table looks cleaner. Too clean. The metal gleams under the light like a mirror, and you can see your own face stretched thin across its surface. The interrogator doesn't speak for the first minute. You can tell by the way he arranges the file center squared, aligned with the edge, that this will be a test. When he finally slides the photograph across, the edges whisper against the table. It's your backpack. Mud-streaked, straps frayed, half-zipped. It looks small in the frame, like something that used to belong to a child. He says, "Found 12 miles from where your camp was reported." You stare. That's impossible. He doesn't argue. Nothing about your route is possible. The photograph glows faintly in the overhead light. You can almost smell it again, the nylon, the dampness, the trace of ash where you burned letters the second night. He adds another photo. "We recovered your notebook inside. Most of the ink washed out, but one page survived." The second image slides into view, your handwriting warped by water damage, but legible enough to recognize. A rectangle. A doorless cabin sketched in quick, frantic strokes. Below it, words blurred but readable. "Not mine." He watches you read. His face gives away nothing. You whisper, "I don't remember writing that." He tilts his head. "Then who did?" You don't answer. Your throat feels thick. "This is a projection exercise," he says softly. "I'm going to ask what this drawing means to you." "It's proof," you say. "Proof that I saw it." He pauses, clicks his pen but doesn't write. "Or that you created it." You shake your head. "The drawing came before I saw it." He blinks once. "Meaning?" You look down at your hands. There's dirt still under the nails, though you haven't been outside for days. "Meaning the cabin drew me." He lets the silence stretch. The vent hums softly overhead, the same low tone as the static used to carry. You can feel the vibration behind your eyes. He breaks the quiet. "Describe what you see in the photograph, not what you remember." "The backpack," you begin. "Heavy when I left, lighter when they found it. Mud in the seams, like it was buried halfway." "Halfway where?" You frown. "Between." He doesn't press. Instead, he unfolds a third photo. A trail of footprints stamped into wet soil, then fading abruptly into nothing. "We think these were yours." But they stop mid-step. You study them. The image is grainy, but something about the shadows feels wrong. The left print overlaps the right slightly, as if the same person walked both directions at once. He says, "What does that suggest to you?" You answer without thinking. "Interference." He looks surprised. "Signal interference?" You nod. "Two broadcasts, same frequency." He underlines something in his notebook. You can't see the words, only the rhythm, short, even strokes like heartbeat readings. He leans forward. "When you saw the man by the creek, you said he never looked up." "I remember that." "What if he did?" Your pulse jumps. "Then I wouldn't be here." "Why?" "Because I'd still be there." He waits. The hum from the lights seems to deepen. You can almost hear water beneath it. He slides the notebook photo closer again. "You wrote 'not mine.' Who do you think it belongs to?" You study the handwriting. It's yours, but the letters lean left instead of right, as if written from the other side of a mirror. "I think it belongs to whoever kept walking." He nods slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening. Not in judgment, but recognition. "You think there's another version of you out there." "There was." "What happened to them?" "They stopped before I did." He folds his hands together, his fingers mirroring yours exactly. "And which of you made it back?" The question sits between you like fog. You swallow. "You tell me." He doesn't. He just watches, waiting for you to follow your own logic to its end. The sound of rain returns. Soft, intermittent, like fingertips brushing glass. You say, "The forest isn't deep. It's wide." He tilts his head. "Explain." "It folds, not stretches. The distance isn't length. It's overlap." He stops writing. His expression tightens, just enough to betray the thought forming behind his eyes. You think you crossed yourself. I didn't think it. I felt it. He exhales slowly. And the version that stayed? You glance toward the dark window. Your reflection there looks thinner, distant, the glass holding you half a second behind yourself. They're still in the cabin. He closes the file. This is what we call a projection test, he says quietly. You're assigning meaning to images. I'm assigning memory to evidence. You correct. For the first time, he smiles. A faint, weary curve of the mouth that doesn't reach his eyes. Sometimes there's no difference. You look down at the photo again. The mud on the backpack forms shapes you hadn't noticed before. Circles intersecting, faint lines that look like topographic contours. You trace one with your finger, and the image darkens under your touch. He stiffens. Don't. But it's too late. The shadow shifts. The inked mud pattern rearranges itself, aligning perfectly with the cabin sketch on the second photo. The two images together form a map. You meet his eyes. You see it too. He doesn't deny it. The fluorescent light flickers once, and both photos quiver. The static hum rises just beneath hearing range. He reaches for the recorder. The red light flashes in rhythm. You whisper, "It's calling again." His voice is barely audible. From where? You smile, but it isn't yours. From inside the picture. The hum swells, and for a moment you both stop breathing. The fog finds its way in before you do. Even with the door sealed and the vents sighing out dry air, you can smell the river again. Cold minerals, wet pine, that faint iron sweetness that coats the back of your throat. He doesn't offer a greeting this time, just a nod toward the chair. The recorder's red light already burns. Tell me what you think really happened, he says. You watch the window. Beyond the glass, daylight and mist have merged into one colorless sheet. The world looks erased. Your reflection floats faintly on the surface. Two eyes, one slower than the other. I thought I came down the mountain, you begin. I thought there'd be sun at the trailhead. Go on. I kept walking, but the ground never changed. The fog got thicker again. The trees were there, but not where I left them. Like the whole forest had memorized my route and was rehearsing it. He folds his hands. You're describing spatial looping. No, you correct softly. I'm describing persistence. He waits. The pause is deliberate. You fill it. I heard water again, not the creak, slower, heavier. It followed at a distance, just far enough to remind me it existed. I walked faster, but it matched me. Always the same distance. He writes something but doesn't look down. Did you ever see a source? No. It was as if the sound itself was walking. You shift in your chair, the leather squeaking like wet bark. The fluorescent light flickers. The pulse behind your eyes syncs with it. You tell him about the moment you realized you weren't casting a shadow. How the fog brightened from below, as though light were seeping upward through the soil. You tell him about the whisper that came with it. The low, steady phrase that's haunted you since. Don't close the loop. He repeats it aloud, testing the weight of each word. What do you think it meant? You shrug. I think it was instruction. For what? For staying lost. The heater kicks on, a low hum that fills the room. The rhythm matches the one from your radio, 3 beats, then 2. You don't mention it, he hears it too. He asks, when the rescuers found you, what did you remember last? Fog at the window, you say. Which window? The one I'm looking at now. He glances toward it, half expecting an answer written in condensation. Only the faint outline of a handprint remains, you're not sure whose. I told them I was fine, you continue. But the light outside never changed. It's been this same hour ever since. He says nothing. The silence stretches until it feels like a second interrogation room has opened inside the first. You add, sometimes I think you're part of it. He tilts his head. The fog. The loop. He doesn't argue. He just studies you, eyes narrowing slightly, not skepticism, calculation. Then he asks the question that will end everything. Do you believe you were found? You look at the window again. Two reflections stare back now, yours and his. But they're misaligned, layered like pages stuck together by moisture. I'm here, you say. Are you? The hum deepens. The edges of the room soften. You blink once, twice, and the second reflection moves a fraction later each time. He whispers, "What do you see?" "Fog," you answer. "Still on the trail." He leans forward. "Maybe it followed you home." You almost laugh, but the sound doesn't leave your throat. "Then maybe you're home too." He straightens, sets the pen down, turns off the recorder. Or tries to. The red light keeps pulsing. Outside, the rain resumes, not falling but pressing against the glass. Each drop spreads thin, smearing light like fingerprints. The sound builds until it fills every gap between words. He speaks over it, voice steady. "You said earlier that you heard breathing when you touched the glass in the cabin." "I still do," you whisper. He stands. "From which side?" You don't answer. The fog outside thickens until the window becomes a mirror. Two figures remain, one seated, one standing, neither perfectly yours. He turns to leave. His hand pauses on the doorknob. "We'll continue when the weather clears," he says. You nod, though neither of you believes it ever will. When the door shuts, the hum stops. You sit alone with the fog, watching it smear your outline until it resembles the sketch in your notebook. The cabin, the lantern, the word "not mine." You realize then what the message meant. The fog wasn't something you entered. It was something that entered you. You place your hand against the glass. It's warm. Outside, another hand presses back. Same size, same scar at the wrist. For a heartbeat, you don't know which side belongs to which. The radio in your memory clicks once. Then again. 3 beats. 2. You whisper into the silence, "I'm still here." And for the first time, something whispers it back. Hood River never forgets its weather. The fog doesn't lift. It rearranges. The rain finds new angles. Even now, years later, people claim to hear static on their car radios near the old trailhead. A gentle pulse, 3 beats, then 2. They say it's just interference from logging equipment. But the pattern never changes. Locals stop hiking when the mist rolls low. Rangers mention a single unmarked clearing where compasses falter and the air grows warm without sun. They call it the Quiet Mile. Your case file stays open, tucked between missing person reports and environmental studies. No conclusion, no closure. Only a note in someone else's handwriting. Subject exhibits consistent temporal dissonance. Believes interrogation ongoing. At home, if this is home, you keep the radio on a shelf near the window. You tell yourself it's broken, that the faint glow under the dial is residual charge. Still, some nights, when the wind slows and the world turns colorless again, you hear the faint click of a recorder starting somewhere nearby. You never speak first. You wait for the pattern. 3 beats. 2. Then softly you reply. The fog at the window listens. The forest listens. Everything that was once silence answers. And maybe, just maybe, you understand now the loop was never meant to close. It was meant to keep you company.